My name is Francesca Passeri. I am Deputy Director for the European Crowdfunding Network, which is one of the partners of the Creative Academy project. I'm very happy to be here to share a bit about crowdfunding, what I know, what I don't know, what might be interesting to explore together. I'm looking forward to this.
What is crowdfunding and how would you place it in the context of, let's say, investment plans?
For me, crowdfunding is a revolution in the financial landscape, if we're going to talk about that. It's a revolution because it's a sort of a democratization of the whole approach to finance. It is a disintermediation between those who seek to raise the funding and those that are willing to provide the funding, not the entire amount, but just a small contribution. So it's really something that is much more open, it's more democratic than what we're used to deal with in the financial landscape. And so it has found its niche, its positioning within the wider ecosystem. But indeed, it is, I wouldn't call it a niche, but it has specific applications. So from my perspective, crowdfunding is not something that we should be looking at as being the one and only solution to all of the issues of, the access to finance, access to funding, but it's one part of the overall pipeline of financing tools. So you can use it for different stages for the company, if you have company growth or if you just have an idea and you want to launch it. But I would recommend to always think about it as one piece of the puzzle. So always combining it with the range of tools and mechanisms that are available. We have, public funds that are basically grants or subsidies in most of the cases. Then you, of course, have crowdfunding of different models that can be non-financial. So they resemble the granting scheme, but you also have financial crowdfunding, which is basically loan-based crowdfunding, so lending-based or investment-based crowdfunding. But of course, it is not sufficient to fulfill the financial needs that a company might have. So it's a good leverage to include in the scheme and then move on to other financing sources that can be business angel funding or VC funding for early-stage startups, companies, even move on to the traditional banking system. So you have different approaches, you have different tools. Each one of them is more suitable to a specific stage or a specific objective. And so this is the way that I would see it providing the most important benefits. So if we don't consider it just as one solution for everything.
The only one, let's say. It's just one of them. If you mix them with different instruments, it's even better.
They amplify each other. So it brings out the good in the rest of the funding options as well.
Looking at it and then considering just as one of the tools in the wider context, then why crowdfunding? What is the specific value of crowdfunding in this context?
The specific value of crowdfunding is primarily the fact that it's an easier access to finance. And take the word easier with very thorough attention, because it doesn't mean that it's just easy. I just put my idea online and I get the funding. That is absolutely wrong. But it, of course, has less requirements, less boundaries. It's more, as I said, democratic. So it's open to a wide number of people that can support your idea. So that would be the first reason. If you are not able, for a number of reasons, maybe you're below threshold for the request of money that you need, maybe you don't have that long track record that sometimes more structured financial intermediaries request, then you can go to crowdfunding and still find your place there. But in addition to that, and I think even more relevant, the reason why a company, a solo entrepreneur, an NGO, an individual would go to crowdfunding is for the range of non-financial benefits that the instrument has. And it's right to think about money first, because I sometimes see that the other way around happens. I use crowdfunding because it gives me a lot of visibility, and then the financing, the funding is so and so important, but it's not, because the other point of attention is if a crowdfunding campaign goes wrong, you will have exposed yourself to a high degree of visibility, so you will have this mixed repercussion because you still will have a failed crowdfunding campaign. So you will always have to make sure that you have a good financial, very well justified financial objective. But the other benefits, as we were saying, for me are related, for example, to the validation of the idea that you can get from the crowd. You can approach the largest number of individuals. You can go beyond the networks that you already have within your community and basically ask them, do you think this is worth it? Do you think this idea, this product, this service that I have is worth it? And they can answer simply by letting you know if they want to contribute to your project or if they don't want to.
This is actually more important than money, if I think now, because money you can get them in different ways, no? While this kind of feedback, above all at the beginning, no, of an initiative, of a project, is extremely precious.
And then think about combining this feedback, so potential client base if you're selling a product, or a customer base or user base, and combining it with the financial options that we were discussing before. So you could actually run a crowdfunding campaign and go then on to a business angel saying, look, this is my business plan on paper, and this is my in real life validation of what I am stating in my papers. And this has a completely different take on the person that is listening to you. So we have seen with Eurocrowd a number of times that the perception of a business that has run a successful crowdfunding campaign and then moves on to the next and the following funding rounds, it's much more positive, or at least there is more openness to listening to it. Then it's not always successful.
And it's not just because they got the money again, but because they were able to convince people to give them money, somehow. And this, I think, in investors create a very positive image, of this project, of this initiative.
Indeed it does. Yeah.
Let's assume that I have a company in Italy or a project. I have a project idea.
Okay.
An Italian young person has a project idea and would like to have this funded at European level, meaning that the idea is conceived in an European way for an European audience. How can I do this? Can I launch this in an Italian platform? Shall I launch this in another platform? Is there a platform working in an European way? Can I do this essentially, and how, if I can?
It's a great question, and the simple answer to this is yes, you can. But the difficult part comes after the yes, you can. So we have a reassurance that yes, you can do it, but then the how comes. And when we go and look more in detail at the how, we have to first understand, for example, which type of crowdfunding model we're using. So if you want to do it in terms of non-financial crowdfunding, that is donation and reward, formally, you can already do it. So that is the yes. Practically, you will have to find a platform, a crowdfunding platform, that is offering the type of model that you want to approach and that is also able to provide you with an IT infrastructure that can cover the geographical area that you want to approach.
Which is not the case, no? Maybe, for most of the platform too.
It's starting to be the case because the evolution of crowdfunding is moving towards the European landscape. But for what I mean is, for example, the IT infrastructure needs to support payments in different currencies, or even the translation of your crowdfunding page even in English. But of course, that reduces the outreach you have. So the more languages the platform can offer you, the higher the audience that you can engage. So this is for reward and donation. If you want to launch a lending or equity crowdfunding campaign, then it becomes even more complicated. Until last year, or even until now, we have to say that European crowdfunding campaigns of the financial type were made impossible by the fragmentation in the regulatory frameworks that were existing at European level. So we had very differentiated laws in each of the member states.
Okay, so meaning that the criteria for launching a campaign or for having a crowdfunding platform in France, for example, are different than Germany, are different than Italy, or slightly different.
Not only different, but sometimes it was properly forbidden by the law, because you had to be a resident, for example, in the state in which you wanted to invest.
Okay.
That was the case in Italy.
Okay.
You could formally do it if you were, an investor from France, but you had to have a security number, a social security number from Italy, which means you have to basically be registered and be based in Italy. So The theory made it possible, the practice made it impossible. But as of November this year, the 10th of November this year, we will have a European regulation that will apply to equity and lending crowdfunding platform. And the effect that this regulation will have is to actually allow them to get an authorization to operate in all 27 EU member states with one application. The process is already started, so we already have some platforms that have received the authorization, and there is a public registry on ESMA, which is the European Securities Markets Authority, but it will become compulsory as of November the 10th. So every lending and equity crowdfunding platform that wants to continue their operations, regardless if they want to do it
in European or at local level, national level, whatever,
they will still need to have the European license.
Okay.
And they will be made, they will be able to operate in all 27 member states. Then, do they choose to do that? Do they want to remain local? Their choice in terms of business.
But at least they can do. That's the point.
They can do. And most of all, the number of platforms that already have applied for the European regulation, they're already scaling up operations to go into different markets. So as of November the 10th, I would say it will be made much easier. There is always a lot. So the problem will remain in terms of tax frameworks, so fiscal frameworks, which are peculiar and they remain a competence of each national member state. So that will be a problem for the near future, I would say, because of...
And when you say fiscal framework, you mean that this is applicable to both the project owners, for example? What does it happen once that they receive the money, for example? If I win a crowdfunding campaign, if I launch a successful crowdfunding campaign and I get the funding, will this funding be taxable or not? These kind of things, right? Or, for example, to operate as a platform, what are the fiscal regulation need to respect? Or
I would say that the problem is slightly different, because if you are a company and you're based in a country, you will pay taxes according to that regulation. So either you raise it through crowdfunding or you raise it through other sources, that will stay the same. For the platform as well, they will be established in one country, so they will pay taxes or have incentives accordingly. Real problem comes from the European embrace and composition of the crowd of investors. Let me make a practical example. We have in Italy incentives for innovative startups and SMEs. Okay, if you invest in one of these startups or SMEs through crowdfunding or without the use of crowdfunding, as an investor, you can get a tax benefit of 30 or 50%, depends on the composition. And same goes for NGOs. For example, if you are a not-for-profit, according to specific criteria organization, you do crowdfunding campaign, if I donate money to you, I have a certain amount of, that money that I have donated that I can deduct from taxes.
Okay.
If I am Italian and I donate to an Italian NGO or
an Italian campaign,
I invest in an Italian SME or innovative startup. But what happens if I am French and I invest in an NGO? Does the NGO have the same criteria that the French government uses to identify a not-for-profit? Is there a transcript that I can use to validate my contribution and deduct it from the French taxation system? Honestly, I don't think so. Same goes for investors, even worse. How can I attract investors at the European level if I know that my Italian audience of potential investors will be able to benefit from a tax advantage, but I am reaching out to Europe? So how am I going to promote myself? How am I going to make aware Italian investors of their potential benefits, but
at the same time?
You know what I mean?
Like, not to disincentivize.
Yeah, risk is that although the framework will allow for European and pan-European campaigns, this will still hinder the practical development of the market, because as an investor, of course, I will, unless I have an extreme interest in the campaign, I will try to combine both the benefit and the interest. And so will remain national.
I mean, there has been a pretty strong evolution in the way in which you put it, but there is still a long way to go, let's say. And I think it took a lot of effort, as well, to join all the players and to join as well, like European Commission, to discuss about this. But I think it's a pretty good, anyway, piece of legislation, and it's really somehow supporting the evolution of the sector.
I would take it for what it is. So it's a first step. It's a first step. It's setting the scene for everything else to happen.
Did you learn something once working with crowdfunding? Is there something that you thought before approaching this topic that once you worked, you completely changed your mind about? So a sort of myth that you can demystify about crowdfunding or around?
There are a number, but the one that is for me the most shocking, it is actually related to the fact that crowdfunding campaigns can fail. They can fail even if one thinks that they are the best thing that could ever be published on the platform. And that happened to me, indeed. When I started approaching the ecosystem, when I started working, you have to kind of enter into the dynamics. And so one of the first things I did is I tried to look for a crowdfunding campaign that I could support to see how it worked from the inside. And I think it was the first or the second one, and I thought it was really the best thing to be out there. And I was certain, I was, I think, among the first 10 supporters to provide contribution. And then I saw the deadline approaching fast and the amount of money that was not coming in, and I was asking myself, how is this possible? How do they not get the money? And indeed it failed. And I thought it was one of the best things that could be out there. So the myth that I want to demystify is, in the first place, it's not a certain instrument. We do not blame necessarily the instrument, because behind the instruments you have a crowd of people. And the second thing is, do not necessarily blame yourself, because you might have a very good idea. You might just want to market it differently or to a different audience, but there is a learning process to be taken home from crowdfunding.
That is probably bigger than the result, right? I mean, the process in itself, staying in the process, learning from this process, it's sometimes at least more important than getting the funding or not, right?
It is. I think it's more important to fail a campaign and learn from it than to reach the target by, the last day, by, reaching the last 1,000 euro in the last 3 hours and not learning from it and thinking it was a good campaign. I think that it's best to learn from what was not going or what has not gone according to plan, because that is something, it's a knowledge that stays with you. The money comes and goes, as they say. So if you can do both, so get the last 1,000 euro in the final 3 hours and still learn and build on what the campaign has taught you, that is perfect. But also from a failed campaign, there is always things to be taken home, worked on, discussed, shared, changed most of the times. And so that would be, I think, the main takeaway for me.
One campaign that you participated to, and why did you do it?
Okay, I will tell you about the last campaign that I supported, and this one was successful. So it reached the target goal. I want to make sure that you all know that the campaigns that I fund are not doomed to fail. That sometimes they succeed as well. And so this one was specifically, I think, within the cultural and creative industries arena, because it was a board game. And it was a board game, so I'm currently based in Forlì, and I am a bit of a history freak, since we're getting personal. And so the board game was actually designed with historical characters and features from the medieval times in Forlì. And it's basically, the board is the representation of the town with all these characters and features that you can play, and they have their own characteristics, so strength, speed and stuff. And it has extensions as well. You can go to Ravenna, to Firenze, to Milan, which were the main and the most powerful houses in Italy in that time. So there I contributed strong. I took the highest level of contribution that I could take, and I want to share a tip. Why? Because it gave me the opportunity to include as an exclusive perk the name of someone, could be my name or someone else, in the instruction booklet for the game. So I use that to basically pre-buy the game and used it as a gift for my partner for Christmas.
Amazing.
So, and that is something that I would have never gotten without crowdfunding. And so that for me, it's been one of the most recent. It was actually last December. And now you can see the game being sold in the stores.
Of course, definitely. I can imagine, yeah.
Because the company, or it was actually a solopreneur, he designed it. It was asking for 8,000 euro as an overall budget, and I think he got 32, if I am not wrong. So I think that you can see there as well. It tells us something. Once the target was reached, the product was so valuable that people were not paying attention to the fact that it was reached already. They really wanted the product, they wanted the perks, and so they kept on contributing.
Until the point that he got, this person got even 4 times, the contribution that he asked.
Indeed.
Pretty successful.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Francesca. It was very nice to have you here. Thank you for listening to this interview, and we see you in the next credit interview. Bye.